We are back with another Romancelandia Uni live lecture. I'm going to go ahead and bring Emily and hi, Debbie.
Yay!
Hey, hello.
On.
Okay. Thank you, everybody who's joining. It's good to see everybody again for a back-to-back science theme. We're excited. Give Emily a second.
Debbie.
Yay.
Debbie, I loved your lecture. I know so little about chemistry, so thank you. I learned a lot.
I told her I have not taken a chemistry class since high school. I studied lit in college, and I felt like I could still keep up. It was so much fun.
So Debbie had posted a picture about teaching Gen Chem 2, which is the class where my now husband and I started spending more time together because we had to be in the same study group. So I like Gen Chem 2 because it's like how I got to know my husband, but I also hate it because it was so hard. So thank you to all the professors out there.
Hello. Okay. Well, it looks like everybody's here, so we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to introduce our guest lecturer tonight. So first, welcome everybody who's joined us for our second this week guest lecture for Romancelandia University, where we are talking science again. Very different corner of science this time. We were so excited to talk about atmospheric chemistry yesterday with Debbie Gale Mitchell, and tonight we are talking about virology and historical romance with Dr. Jillian Carmichael. So welcome to Jillian. I did want to just talk a little bit about Jillian's background. So Jillian is a molecular virologist who spent over a decade in academic research labs before working in biodefense. She got her PhD studying herpes, which if you follow her on Instagram, this is not new news. You have learned a lot about herpes, which is fantastic. And she's always excited to talk about herpes and other sexually transmitted infections. Her area of expertise is how to make mutant viruses to study for fun and engineering viral vectors. She started reading romance in 2021 as a way to cope with postdoc pandemic life in New York City. So welcome, Dr. Jillian Carmichael.
Welcome, Jillian. Nobody, I never go by Dr. Carmichael anymore, so it's kind of funny to hear. You work very hard to get that PhD, and then you're like, eh.
Well, we use it here in Romancelandia University. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk about viruses and some other pathogens that might not be viruses, but that's okay.
We love it. So this was, honestly, you have done a nice job. I know that you did a collaboration with Claire, Unsuccessful Book Club, where you talked about plagues in various historical romances.
We did a small
and that was kind of, that was kind of what got my mind thinking about this.
We did a syphilis one.
Yeah.
The French pox.
And so I would love to hear just a little bit about what you are looking for when you're reading historical romance, and maybe start us out with just like a 101, because we probably all need a 101 on virus, pathogen. Yeah, the words you're going to use tonight.
The words I'm going to use? Okay, okay. So I have introduction points, which you gave some already. Great. So I am a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. So yes, like what Debbie was saying yesterday, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm not a physician. And with any talk where I'm talking about science, I feel like I have to do a shout out to vaccines, because vaccines have been I'm like such a huge vaccine fangirl. Vaccines have probably saved more lives than just about any other human invention. Like millions and millions of people are alive today and have lived because of vaccines. And we'll be talking a little bit about that as we kind of go through the different pandemics and stuff. So I love vaccines. And really thinking about infectious disease and romance. So I read a lot of romance, and I would say the last 2 years I've really started to dive into historical romance. So I'm not like Tori, who's been reading historical romance for over 15 years. No, I think I've been reading historical romance for about 2 years now. So trying to read as much as I can, but I do have a more limited view. And so with that, I think when we all read romance, we are always looking for our interest points. So when it shows up, we're like, ooh. And I'm that way with, infectious disease. And so I guess we can do a little bit of terminology 101. So before COVID, I would always have to describe describe to people that like a virologist is a scientist who studies viruses. And I feel like now people at least have heard of virology, whereas like 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of people didn't know what it was. So I've been in the virology field for over a decade. I fell in love with viruses and like studying them in undergrad and decided to go get my PhD, studying herpes and just like viruses in general. And so it's just always something I've been really interested in. And so when I was thinking, I think Kelsey, you were the one who reached out. You're like, would you want to do like one of these lectures? I was like, ooh, that sounds fun. So when I was thinking about like talking about virology and historical romance, I was thinking more like, well, when we're reading historical romance, like virology wasn't even a field back then. Mm-hmm. And so I think
you're a scientist of the humor.
Yeah.
You study the humor.
Right. Like virology. So I if you see me looking up, I made notes so I could get the dates right. But like, I think what's really important to remember is that right now we're reading historical romance with like our 2024 lenses. Mm-hmm. So like whether this was historical romance that was released this year or was that was released in like the 80s, we're coming to that with a modern perspective. We know things that the characters in the books didn't. And I feel like some authors do a really good job of this, where they'll describe like a disease or an infection and we're like, ooh, we know what that is. Ooh, this is bad. But people living in that time period might not. And so I just think that's always a really interesting juxtaposition to be like what we know as modern readers versus what people were experiencing in the Georgian era or in the Regency era or like onward. They just didn't know as much. Like, yes, they had infections, yes, they had diseases, but they didn't necessarily know what was causing that disease. And so, yeah, it's just kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, like a mind, like messes with your mind, because when I was thinking about just like virology and medicine as a field, like if we're talking about historical romance, like a lot of it's been written in the last like 50 years. So like we think about Kathleen Woodward, and like in the late 70s, early 80s is when, I don't know, the genre began. And people can make other arguments, but let's just say it began in like the 70s or 80s. In the 70s and 80s, people knew what viruses were. They had antibiotics, they had vaccines. So even though medicine has changed a lot in the last 40 years, I would say that like it changed even more from like 1900 to 1970, just in the 20th century. And so when we read historical romance, we have to remember like the characters didn't know as much. And even if we read historical romance that was published in the 90s, like there was a lot of biomedical interventions that were around in the 90s. And so,
but also the advent of the internet comes a little later. So people who are writing these stories don't have the world at their fingertips when they're researching the books. And I think that it may be in the 70s and 80s, if you're authoring historical romances, you might be like, they don't know. Just like, you know,
who's
gonna know?
Yeah.
Or you can tell when someone like Googled it and like only read the top hit, and you're like, scroll a little down.
Should have emailed Dr. Jillian Carmichael about that.
This is when I read, when I know too much about a topic and you read and you're like looking for inaccuracies. We all do this. And so that's whenever I read historical romance and they're like infectious diseases mentioned, I'm like, okay, how accurate is it?
So, okay, wait. Does this hinder your enjoyment of historical romance ever? Because for me, when I'm reading contemporary romance and they're talking about what everybody's job is, I'm immediately like, that's not what that's like. Like, I hate it. I get so annoyed.
Yes.
And that's why I prefer historical romance a lot of the time, because I'm not doing such a close read for factuality with historical romance. I'm like, this is the realm of fantasy. I'm sure they did their research. It's fine. But if I was a virologist, I don't know.
No, I totally agree with you. I have great difficulty reading books where someone's in STEM and I'm like, oh, like contemporary romance. I'm like,
wait, really quickly, Allie Hazelwood. Yes, no.
Are we just throwing it?
No.
Emily was like, this wasn't controversial enough after the vaccine intro, so I would just like to throw in some contemporary authors.
You don't have to answer that.
I appreciate that she's a scientist writing romance. That said, the love hypothesis, like a student and professor, no.
Debbie.
Loving
I have told my science friends loathe the love hypothesis, whereas like general non-scientists are like more accepting of it. I will say, we get one more comment about contemporary romance that I can go back. Allie did get science Twitter right in her second book. I was like, okay, that is accurate. But
I didn't read it because
no.
I heard it was exactly like the first one.
Oh, I've only read 2. But yes, I have much greater difficulty reading contemporary romance where I just know too much to enjoy it. And I feel like this goes across all, not just science, like any field. If you are in that field and you know too much, you're like, no. But I agree, like with historical romance, I can sort of forget a little bit. And unless something's like glaringly wrong, in which case I usually just get a kick out about it. Yeah. Because it's like something so specific. I'm like, well, you would really only know that if you're in the field. And then
do you ever read historical romance and the people in the books know things and you're like, they absolutely would not know that?
Oh my God,
like,
yes.
Like Sebastian, Lord St. Vincent being like, I have this pamphlet on germ theory and I think you should wear a mask when dealing with your consumptive father.
Oh my goodness. I just read a book, I have it on here to talk about, and it was like a Regency era novel. And I was like, this physician knows way too much, which I realized, like, as an author, maybe the authors want to like make their heroes or their heroines like very knowledgeable and like appeal to our 21st century knowledge, right? Like we know about germ theory, so like, okay, the character should know. But yeah, no, that makes me laugh. I do see that sometimes and I notice. But in thinking about like virology and historical romance, I was like, well, when was virology even termed as a field? So I went and I read some papers because I've read this at some point, but then I forget. So I will do a quick 101 on like virology, just a very quick history. The term virus didn't come about till the late 1800s. So 1892 is like typically when viruses were discovered, but they weren't even actually like visualized. Basically, these scientists took this sap from an infected plant, a plant that was sick, and they passed it through a really fine filter that could filter out bacteria. And then they took that filtered sap and transferred it to another plant, and that plant got infected. So they called it this ultra filterable agent. There was something in that liquid that was able to like pass on the infection, and the virus was
UFA.
Yeah. So this was 1892. So like that's pretty like that's like Gilded Age era, right? Or like very like late Victorian age. And when we're thinking about like our romance timeline that Meg did. And that's when the idea that there were infectious agents that were so small or like could pass through the filters that were different from bacteria. It wasn't until, 1938 was when we actually saw pictures of viruses for the first time. So like that's almost 50 years. And the early 20th century, so from like 1900 to 1920, 1930, a whole bunch of viruses, even though they couldn't see them, were discovered. So you have measles, yellow fever, dengue. They're like, oh, well, this isn't caused by a bacteria. It's caused by something else. And so then you have, 1938, you see viruses. About 1949, scientists developed methods to be able to grow cells and then be able to grow viruses and start doing like research that could lead to vaccines. And then in 1954, Jonas Salk, he was the dude who made the polio vaccine. I think a lot of people know his name. That's when that came out. And then, yes, it was like 70 years ago, but that's really not that far ago, right? And then so that's viruses. And then in terms of antibiotics, which target bacteria, that's like the 40s. So all of this is within the last 100 years, and it has made such a big difference. So that's just when we think about viruses, like late 1800s is when the idea was termed, but visualizing them didn't come until like right before World War II. So it's very recent, right? So most of the historical romance we read is before scientists, before physicians, before scientists knew what they were. So I don't know, it's kind of a mind trip. But I was thinking,
how much of like, like the doctoring profession, what percentage of physicians prior to this time are just doing like all and out quackery?
That is an excellent question that I don't know the answer to, but it brings up an excellent point that in terms of like, this is one of the things that I was thinking about in like reading historical romance with our 2024 knowledge is diagnostics. So diagnostics is how do you determine what is making you sick? So in the era of modern medicine, we have a whole bunch of diagnostic things, like obviously like diagnosing cancers and other, non-communicable, non-infectious diseases. There's tons of tests that we can do. Like you think about like a blood glucose test if you're diabetic, or like during your pregnancy, like that's just a test we can do and it can tell us what's wrong with us. So today like, let's say you have some infection, you go to the doctor, you have physical symptoms, so the doctor checks your physical symptoms, then they take a sample. They can grow a culture in lab, they can directly sequence it, they can figure out, and if it's a new virus, they can sequence that and figure it out right away. Oh, Debbie just said a lot of diagnostics tests use spectroscopy.
Yeah.
Spectroscopy.
I love
That's
it.
a word I can say.
Yeah. And so there's like there's in big hospitals, there's a whole medical microbiology lab that's dedicated to figuring out what people are sick with so that we can treat them. So like, oh, are they sick with a bacterial infection? We'll give them antibiotics. Are they sick with the virus? And we can know exactly what you're sick with very quickly. Even like rapid antigen tests, like those COVID swabs, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a diagnostic you can do at home without ever seeing a doctor.
And there's a Quest truck on every freeway right now.
Yeah. But like in historical, like they didn't
anybody who's been pregnant has gotten a million letters from them.
But like before the era of like molecular biology, what did physicians have? Mm-hmm. They had physical symptoms.
Yeah.
So physical symptoms
and ingrained biases and that went largely unchecked.
Yeah.
I'm thinking right now of A Kiss from Midwinter.
I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's a good one. No virology, but it's a great
virology, but quackery. A doctor who's doing a little bit of quackery and like malpractice. And Debbie did a great video on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to go look it up.
Yeah.
But like we think about physicians, so even like a gifted physician, someone who like knows their stuff, they just didn't have diagnostics, so they relied very heavily on physical symptoms. Okay. And you see this in history, like trying to differentiate rashes from each other. And so like a measles rash looks different than a scarlet fever rash, and how to tell the difference. And so it's very interesting. And so obviously things went misdiagnosed, of course. But diagnostics are drastically different. And I think that's something really interesting in historical romance, to see like physicians trying to figure out what is making people sick. So as I was like putting together, like, how do I want to organize this? I was thinking of just about infections in general and like infectious disease. So infectious disease and like is caused by pathogens, and in like pathogens you can have bacteria, which are single-celled like prokaryotic organisms, so not viruses. So little back like E. coli is a bacteria that I feel like everyone knows about. So they can grow on their own, they're very simple, they're single-celled. And then you have viruses, which is what I study, and these are basically like little genetic bombs. They have their own genetics. They're covered in like a protein and fat shell, and they can get into a cell and take over and make more of themselves. And so they require a host to replicate. So just a virus by itself isn't going to make you sick, but if a virus gets inside your cell, then it can make you sick. So you have bacteria, you have viruses, and then you can also have parasites. Like malaria is a parasite, but I didn't put it on the list because that's too hard for me. But so you have all of these different pathogens, and I was thinking, like in historical romance, where do the pathogens show up? And I kind of subdivided it into 3 categories. So the first category is pathogens that have pandemic potential. So pathogens that can make a whole bunch of people sick, that have made a whole bunch of people sick. And what's really important is that these pathogens can typically spread from person to person or from like animal to person and then spread widely. So you have pathogens that can cause pandemics. You have pathogens that can cause sexually transmitted infections, herpes, HIV, syphilis. These would be those viruses. And then you have pathogens that are opportunistic. So these are pathogens that are only going to make you sick if you're like hurt or your immune system isn't functioning. So like in historical romance, the classic example is somebody gets shot and that wound gets infected. Mm-hmm. That wound isn't going to cause a pandemic, but that person could die. Yeah. So you have these kind of like 3 categories of pathogens, and I just have to do a shout out to Devil in Winter.
I was just going to say, speaking of Devil in Winter again,
because it is the holy. I mean, it's a great book. Like the romance is just fantastic, but in terms of infectious disease, it's like the holy grail, or like the Trinity. It has all 3. So it has. Evie's dad is sick with tuberculosis, which would fall under the like pandemic potential. You have the villain has late stage syphilis, which is sexually transmitted disease.
The French disease?
Yes, the French disease, the French pox. It is not a pox virus, right? Like it's.
They don't know. They don't know a lot of stuff.
They didn't know. know. They didn't know. They just called things pox based on how the rashes looked, right?
Yeah.
And then you have, and then maybe this is a spoiler. Sebastian gets shot and almost dies because of an infection. So you have
the wound
you have all three of these things. So I was like, well, you could really go a whole lot of ways, but I tried to pull together a list of books that just focused on the first category. So these are pathogens that have pandemic potential, so that can spread widely, that have killed, millions of people worldwide. And I was really trying. I did a lot of hunting. Reddit came through. I got a lot of good recommendations for infectious disease in historical romance on the
reading a lot.
I've been reading all over the place. So it's been fun. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
But so I was just thinking I could highlight some of the different plagues and pandemics through history and then see like which historical romance books hit those. And so I will say, like, I'm gonna differentiate between bacterial pandemics and viral pandemics because they are different, and both show up. So obviously I like viruses a little more because that's my cup of tea, but it all sort of falls under the category of infectious disease. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm gonna scroll down in my notes here. Okay.
Anybody who follows Jillian on Storygraph, the last 2 weeks have just been infectious disease HR central. It's just like your spread of books has been amazing. I've been so impressed by how widely read you are now in infectious disease and HR.
I'm trying to hunt down as many as I can. So it's been a journey. I've read some books like authors I've never heard of. I'm like, but there's a virus, so I'm gonna read it. Okay.
People are sick. I want to watch them fall in love.
Exactly. And so I'll just go through like different pandemics, and sort of chronologically waving hands. Like pathogens have been around as long as humans have been around. Viruses have evolved with us. Like they've always been making us sick. So take it with a grain of salt. Okay. So first up would be the Black Death, the bubonic plague. Like, I feel like we all learn about this in middle school, during the medieval ages. I had to go back and do some Googling because I didn't remember when it exactly happened. So the bubonic plague is caused by a bacterial pathogen. So this is a bacterial pandemic caused by Yersinia pestis is the name of the bacteria. And it's spread from like infected fleas on rats and like bites and like close contact with humans. And then it just spreads rampantly. So if you think about like sanitary conditions, not having fleas, not having rats will help to get rid of the problem. And we can see this throughout history. A lot of these pandemics were exacerbated or happened because of unsanitary conditions. So plague has a fatality rate. So that means like how many people die who get it, of 30 to 100% if left untreated. So it's very deadly. And there's still like plague bacteria today. We just know how to treat it with antibiotic. Black Death, my favorite. I love that. So the plague first hit Europe mid 14th century. So this is like the 1300s. And I was doing some Googling because I learned about this ages back, but I had forgotten. It's still considered one of the most deadliest pandemics. Like 200 million people are estimated to have died from plague.
That's wild.
In the 14th century. Like it wiped out like, what is it? Like over 2/3 of the population, which I cannot fathom. And it was horrific and fast. And so like you learn about this in middle school and you like forget. And then as an adult, you're like, wow, that's really bad.
Yeah, especially as an adult who's lived through a plague.
And it has actual scale sense now that we didn't,
So when I was looking for books that featured plague, and it wasn't just the 14th century, like there were outbreaks later as well, but it was like the worst in the 14th century. So these are older, like medieval style books. So there's, I have 3 books here listed, and 2 of them I haven't gotten to reading yet. A Bed of Spices by Barbara Samuel has been recommended to me. It was published in 1993. It's set in the 14th century, so like during that huge outbreak. So it's supposed to be really good. I think it's like a forbidden romance between like a Jew and a Christian. So I don't know. I haven't read it yet. The Maid of Honor by Dinah Dean was published in 1987. It's set in the 1660s. So there was another pandemic, plague outbreak then. But then the book that I'm actually currently reading right now that features plague is For My Lady's Heart by Laura Kinsale, who wrote Flowers from the Storm. It is, I was messaging Kelsey about this. It's just like an incredible book for like lots of reasons. It's written the dialogue's written in Middle English.
Yeah,
so
it's like early modern English. It's like, it feels like you're reading Chaucer. Yeah. It's rough to read with your eyeballs. It's wonderful on audio.
Oh, see, I'm reading it with my eyeballs. I should have listened to it. But
Nicholas Bolton reads all the Kinsale. They're all Audible exclusives, but he just he's reading for his life. He's just acting these out beautifully, and his ruck is hot.
I'll have to go look it up. Anyways, I'm in the middle of it right now, and it's set in the 14th century. So it's set in the second wave. So the first wave of the Black Death has happened, and this is like maybe 10 to 15 years later. And so our hero, Ruck, we learn he is the lone survivor. His entire family, his entire village and like castle were wiped out. And that is what happened. And at one point, the two protagonists come across this village in Abbey that's like literally just everyone is dead from the plague. And it really, like, that is how bad plague was. So I'm loving this book, For My Lady's Heart by Laura Kinsale. I mean, again, this was so long ago, but I feel like it's pretty accurate in terms of like the scientific and like the plague representation.
I really feel like Laura Kinsale did like zero half measures. Like she really like works hard to write a book. And it's like, it's in the dialogue, it's in the research. Also, like, this book is so good, and I rate it like a hearty 5 stars. And I also am like, medievals are not for me because I don't want to be alive then. It sucks.
Well, exactly.
It's so hard to stay alive.
Oh my God.
I hate it.
Yeah. So I
don't want to fall in love. I want to die. I want to be gone.
I'm only 2/3 of the way through, but I'm loving it so far. So definitely that's a good plague one. Okay. So our next pandemic that I'm going to talk about is smallpox, which I feel like most people have heard about. So smallpox is a viral pandemic. So yay, viruses. It's caused by variola virus. That's the type of virus that is caused by a case fatality rate. So this means, again, like if you get it, what % of people die? About 1/3 of people who got smallpox died. So very deadly, very, very deadly. And it often left survivors with really horrific scarring. So you can like look up smallpox on the internet. It's like on the Wikipedia page. You can see the lesions. It was bad. And it's extremely contagious. I mean, a lot of these viral pandemics, like these viruses are so contagious. And historians actually can use smallpox spread to like look at where humans went in history because it's been around for so long. And so like, of course, we know in history about like the colonists bringing smallpox to the United States and using that as like biological warfare against the Native Americans. And it was horrific. But like smallpox also followed, like anywhere humans went, smallpox went. That is how contagious it was. And fun fact, so Edward Jenner is typically the one who's credited with making like the first smallpox vaccine. But actually there were types of like, it's called variolation. It's like an early type of vaccination that was used in parts of Asia and parts of Africa way before Edward Jenner showed up. So for a fun history, you should look up Onesimus is his name. He was a slave who was in Boston and helped to stop his experience with like this vaccination variolation in Africa. He basically used that knowledge to help stop a Boston outbreak of smallpox. So fun history lesson. We see like, oh, first discovered by, and you're like, well, if it's a Western white scientist, was it the first discovered by? Like we should look.
Was it? Yeah.
Don't take that first Google result, people.
So anyways, it's a fascinating story. If you're like interested in his history, his name was Onesimus. It's really cool. But I just have to like fangirl for a moment. Smallpox is the only human pathogen to ever be eradicated. There is no circulating smallpox today. I have not been vaccinated against smallpox. If you're my age, you haven't been vaccinated against smallpox because it was eradicated through a vaccination campaign. So this would be like our parents' generation. And this was a huge like public health campaign. I would say it's one of the greatest success stories in medicine. I like get chills thinking about it. But yeah, there's no smallpox anymore because it's been eradicated, which is super cool.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so yay for vaccines.
Yay vaccines.
And Debbie asked, and I don't know the answer, is smallpox airborne like measles?
Yes,
That's from Debbie.
Yes.
Okay.
It is airborne. So any of these like super infectious viruses, they're all airborne. So
It's like
smallpox is airborne.
you're living in close quarters.
Yeah. And like the actual like pox, the lesions were also like just shed tons of infectious virus. Fun times.
Fun.
So in historical romance, I feel like there were just smallpox outbreaks all the time. So you can like see it popping up. It's not like it was limited, like, oh, like the Black Death mostly happened in the medieval era. No, like it just, smallpox was like kind of, you had these outbreaks all the time because it was so infectious. And so I've read a couple books that don't necessarily feature a smallpox outbreak, but have main characters who survived smallpox and then are scarred. Exactly, which I think is very realistic. So I would say the two books that I would recommend are, one, The Raven Prince by Elizabeth Hoyt. I love that book. It was her first book published in 2006. It's set in the Georgian era, so kind of the same era that her Maiden Lane series is set in. And the hero in that case, he had survived smallpox as like a teenager. It killed the rest of his family, and he's scarred. It's just a really great romance overall.
That's
and then a book
great romance, by the way, for anybody who's like newer to historical romance, which I don't know if people who are newer to historical romance are watching our lecture series, but I hope they are. But it's based on the Beauty and the Beast story that comes from like Norse countries. It's called like East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and it's told like every chapter heading has like a snippet of this story about the Raven Prince, but in the original story it's about like a white bear, and it's the exact Beauty and the Beast story that is used for A Court of Thorns and Roses for any of y'all romantic-y girls. So that's my fun Raven Prince fact.
It was my first Hoyt book, and I like
it's
love
my
it.
first Hoyt too, and I haven't read Maiden Lane yet, so I'm just kind of waiting.
It's very good. So that one, the hero is scarred, and then I read a book earlier this year where the heroine survived smallpox as a child and is scarred. It's called A Duke Won't Do by Jessie Clever. She survived smallpox and is scarred. And it's a sweet romance. The hero like doesn't care at all. He just needs a wife. So it's like one of those romances. But it's funny, at one point some like child has an allergic reaction and she like thinks it's smallpox and like panics, which you would.
Yeah.
And so then they get the doctor, and the doctor's like, no, this is not smallpox. But I thought that was like an interesting, I don't know, little fact.
You should still be scared because we're dealing with run-of-the-mill anaphylaxis.
Bridgerton, right? 101. But my smallpox recommendation for a book, which I actually read like 2 years ago, so I read it pretty early on in my historical romance journey, is Silver Lining by Maggie Osborne. It's an American Western romance. It was published in 2000. So like those were the vibes. I did not read it for the smallpox content. I read it because it was like a sort of like an arranged, it's more of like a forced marriage book, which I like love those books. But basically this book is set in like the Rocky Mountains in the gold rush. So this would have been like 1850-ish. So you have all these prospectors, and our heroine is this like ugly duckling. Literally, they call her Lowdown is her name. Yeah, I don't know. It's a thing. But the book starts off, she's basically at this camp. She's working as a prospector among all of these men, and smallpox comes through the camp. And I think it's been a few years since I read it. I think she must have been exposed as a kid and like didn't get sick. She stays and she nurses all of the men back to health. She like keeps them alive. And so like that's the whole prologue of the book, is her basically doing everything she can to keep this camp of men who are experiencing smallpox alive. And then most of them end up surviving. And then as a result, they're like, we'll give you anything you want. And so she goes, I want a baby. And so hence a forced marriage. And it's, it's a whole thing. But I think the book is really good and it's interesting. So I feel like a lot of people who like, I don't know, Western romances have read this one. So yes, Silver Lining by Maggie Osborne starts off with smallpox and a forced marriage, if you like that. Okay. Oh, the next one. Okay, so the next pandemic is scarlet fever. So I feel like a lot of us have heard of scarlet fever. This is caused by bacterial pathogens. So we're going back to bacteria. It's actually caused by a toxin that's produced by a bacteria, Streptococcus pyogenes, or like group A strep. So like it's like strep throat, but make it bad, right? And I think in literature, actually, when I think of scarlet fever, I think of Little Women.
I think
right?
of Beth March.
Beth dies from scarlet fever. And in Little House on the Prairie, the older sister.
Spoiler alert, guys.
Goes blind from scarlet fever, I think. So like this
I actually have not read Little Women yet.
I haven't either. We're supposed to read, but like everyone knows Beth.
I know, I'm giving you a hard time. I know Beth died.
Beth has like long scarlet fever.
Okay, thank you.
She's weakened from an infection when she's like a teen, and then as she grows into adulthood, she's like never well again.
Emily is writing this.
She has like long COVID, but it's long scarlet fever.
Oh my god.
Ooh.
So
spoiler
also
alert for Velveteen Rabbit.
Traumatizing children from a young age.
I need to know if I understand scarlet fever, because the way, I mean, anytime I have a sore throat, my mom is in a total panic of like, you have to go and get a strep test. So my understanding was strep, if untreated, could progress to scarlet fever. Is that how that works, or is it different?
It's like has to be a specific type of strep. And I'm not a bacteriologist, so like my understanding of strep is just like what I've read and used my science brain to think about. But yes, like if you have a persistent sore throat, go to the doctor. And it's actually interesting. So a lot of times scarlet fever, it was named so because these people would get like really red scarlet rashes. It was also accompanied by a sore throat. But they didn't put two and two together that like the sore throat could then be followed by the rash until way later in history. But like if left untreated, so before antibiotics, scarlet fever had a case fatality rate of like 15 to 20%. So again, like loads of people died from this, especially like children. And there were just like epidemics of this throughout history. Like this is something that would, come around. You think about kids get strep throat. Like I had strep throat as a kid. You take antibiotics, you're fine. And not every case of strep throat will progress to scarlet fever, but it is still a problem. According to I'm like looking at my notes. According to the CDC, in the US, there's about 14,000 to 25,000 cases of this like invasive type of strep throat, group A strep disease every year. And about 1,500 to 3,000 people die from these infections. So like scarlet fever is still a thing, right?
It's not putrid throat, is it?
I don't think so, but I don't know.
I was just thinking about Poldark and when I had to stop watching.
Oh, Poldark. You may have gotten a little further than I did. So the other one I keep thinking about for all of this, and I will admit to this group that I've only watched Outlander. I have not gone back to read Outlander, but I'm also getting like, I remember
there's a small
throughout your talk, Jillian, I'm like,
thing with Outlander, right?
Yeah. So that's how she discovers there's another time traveler, is because she sees her smallpox vaccine scar in the show. So I can't speak to accuracy in the books. And then she also infamously, she tastes the urine of a patient to see if they're diabetic. Is that in the book?
I haven't.
Back to your diagnostics.
I think that's in the book. There's a lot of like wacky medical stuff that's like there. At one point in a later book, she packs a gunshot wound with blue cheese. It's wild. Like
Jillian, the whole time you were talking, I was like, oh, there's an Outlander episode that.
There's always an Outlander episode for that.
Yeah.
I watched like half of it half of the first season a long time ago, and then grad school beckoned, and I never finished.
Someday you'll want it, and it'll be
there for me.
Yep.
It'll be there.
Yeah. Okay. So HR books featuring scarlet fever. I have read two. The first is one that I read just this like last week in my binge would be Seduce Me at Sunrise by Lisa Kleypas. This was published in 2008. It's part of the Hathaway series. I chaos read it. It's the second book. I was like, I'm skipping straight to the strep throat scarlet fever.
So you missed the first book because it's important in Seduce Me at Sunrise that Leo's love interest died from this outbreak that happened, and in the first book she is a ghost who haunts him.
Oh, okay. Well, so yes.
That's amazing.
With Lisa. You never know what she's gonna do.
I picked up that Leo's love interest died from scarlet fever. So in Seduce Me at Sunrise, the heroine Wynn had survived a scarlet fever outbreak, but she's like left sickened from it and like goes to France to recuperate.
She's in Beth mode for a minute.
Yes. And so that book was like, meh. I've read a few other Lisa Kleypas that I like more. That book was just like fine. And then the other book I've read that features scarlet fever was an Eloisa James book, When Beauty Tamed the Beast. And so this is like her fairy tale retellings book. It was published in 2011. It's set in Wales in like the late Georgian era, I think, like late 1700s from what I remember. And the hero's a physician. So if you like books where, you know, one of the main characters is a physician, the hero is a physician, and basically what happens is like him and the heroine Lynette, like they clash a bunch. They have this like tense relationship. And then there ends up being a scarlet fever outbreak. And so he like sends her away kind of cruelly, of course, because, you know, you gotta have that part, but he sends her away.
It's a Beauty and the Beast retelling.
Yes, yeah. To like keep her safe. Of course she ends up getting scarlet fever, right? And like he finds her, you know, like nurses her back to health. It's a whole thing. But so that book, she gets really sick and almost dies from scarlet fever. So those are the two books that I've read that have scarlet fever. Okay, like moving on to my different, measles. We gotta talk about measles. So measles is another pathogen that I feel like we also need to talk about because it's still relevant today. Measles is caused by measles virus, and it's actually the family of viruses that I studied as a postdoc. So it's in the paramyxovirus family. So I've worked with measles. I'd say I'm pretty familiar with it. So measles is like smallpox. It's spread by a respiratory route. It's super infectious. It's one of the most infectious viral pathogens. Like you can walk through a room that someone who had measles was in like an hour ago and get measles if you're not vaccinated. Like it's that infectious, right? Like way more infectious than COVID. And it is like still circulating in parts of the world today. I'm trying to think, let me look at my notes. And what's unfortunate is that it is most serious in young children. So like kids under 5. And right now, the vaccine that we have, the MMR vaccine, is very effective, but kids have to be 1 before they get it. And so you have, especially now with like anti-vaccine movements, you have all of these infants who cannot be vaccinated until they're 1. So if they're circulating measles, they're at risk. So I can like go off on that all day. And I'll just like shout out to vaccines. It's estimated that the MMR vaccinations have saved over 50 million lives just in this century. So just like since the year 2000, right? And so I actually haven't read a romance that like specifies a measles outbreak, but measles is mentioned a lot in historical romance because it was so common. Like again, where there were humans, there was measles, and it's not as deadly as smallpox, right? So basically like everyone got measles at some point.
Well, and to your point, Jillian, like, because people always cite that, you know, when people complain about MMR vaccination, it's always the like, it's barely deadly, you know, like the case fatality rate is so low. But if everyone gets it, it's very deadly. Like when the denominator is extremely high, and that's where I appreciate you talking about just the scale of measles and the actual infectious rate.
Yeah. And like, so I was looking this up because I was like, I know there's still measles deaths in the US. So in 2021, an estimated 128,000 people died from measles, most children under the age of 5. So like, we're still seeing a lot of death. And this is a vaccine preventable death. The vaccine is incredibly effective. So like, obviously in developed countries, a lot of this is due to like anti-vaccine movement, but also in like lower income and middle income countries, we have to think about vaccine availability, public health efforts. So it is a complex issue, but like measles could be eradicated like smallpox if we can vaccinate enough people, because it's not a virus that spreads in other animals. Like humans are the only ones who get measles. So if we can get everyone vaccinated, then no more measles. So anyways, if you have an HR vet book that specifically has measles, you can recommend it to me, but I feel like it's just one of those things that's just mentioned off the cuff, like, oh, they had measles, because literally everyone had measles back in those days. Like it would have been one of those common childhood infections that most people survived, but a chunk didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get through the rest of these. So the next pathogen up is typhus. Now we're back to bacteria. This is caused by a bacterial agent. So typhus is caused by Rickettsia prowazaki. That's the name of the bacteria. And it's different from typhoid. Kelsey and I were talking about this. Typhoid and typhus are different. I didn't realize this at first. I had to do some Googling. So typhoid is caused by salmonella. a type of salmonella, and it's spread through the fecal oral route. So like eating contaminated food or contaminated water. You look confused, like norovirus.
I just was thinking about the Lisa Kleypas Where Dreams Begin, and I was like, wait, what?
Well,
it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
In that
water quality was not great, clearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But typhus was spread through lice, infected lice. So this is another one that has sort of disappeared with sanitation efforts. Like, yes, antibiotics, but also sanitation.
Okay.
So this is a great one for historical romance, particularly because, you know, we read, like Debbie talked about this yesterday in terms of like the smog in, you know, London in the 1800s. Well, now we have better pest control efforts. Yeah. One would hope. And so I didn't realize typhus was super deadly. It had like a case fatality rate of like 10 to 40% if left untreated. So it was like very deadly. And now it can be treated with antibiotics. And so I feel like, let's see, there were typhus outbreaks throughout history. There was apparently a big one during like Napoleon's War, which I guess makes sense because like soldiers were living in terrible conditions, like lice would be
have lice. Yeah.
Okay, so I've read 2 historical romance books that feature typhus. The first is a Loretta Chase book. Kelsey, you will love this. Dukes Prefer Blonde.
It's a great book.
Which I read, I chaos read because of the
You chaos read it. She read it without reading all of the dressmakers. She had none of that beautiful Clara buildup.
I know.
But it's okay.
Clara is like the star of the series.
She gets a 4-book buildup.
I need to go back and reread the series. But the typhus was really great.
Don't
love
do
the moment.
She did. If you're watching this and you haven't read the dressmakers, read them in order.
Read them in order. Even chaos readers should read the dressmakers in order. But I love, like, I can still remember those little, I still remember the moment where they're going upstairs in the home where all those little boys live, because they're homeless, and she's going in to try to find the one boy that she knows, and he's like, don't touch the railings, and that felt so, like, the stair railing, that felt like a modern moment, but maybe they understood that about typhus then. But
railing.
I don't think they realized the lice part, but like sanitation. So
yeah, they knew that the house was dirty.
So she gets typhus as an adult because she goes to visit this like orphan, you know, a place where lice would be, right? And what I thought was really interesting doing some like reading into just like the clinical manifestations of typhus is it's actually more deadly in adults than it is in kids. So Loretta Chase does this well, right? Because she gets way sicker than like the kids who have typhus. Right, like it's and so the heroine gets typhus basically, and then the hero nurses her back to health. And it's a great book, but I did chaos read it. But she does get typhus, and she contracts it in a way that you would contract typhus. So I thought that was well done.
And the male love interest takes care of her beautifully, if not like a little bit removed.
That book does so much. That book works so hard.
I will reread them in order, Meg. I promise.
Even Meg, though, if I'm reading this right, I just want to on the record that Meg said, I think you can read Claire's book first. I know Ella did too. Meg, who is a series order reader, so just making sure that
Meg, you're confused.
I tend to read series more in order unless it's like a specific disease, and then I'm like, I'm just
Yeah.
We have to troll Jilly. I don't think there's any other infectious disease that I can think of, but Claire's book is so good. I love caretaking, so if you like typhus and caretaking, Dukes Prefer Blonde.
But if you're sensitive about kids in books, that book specifically is examining like all of the many different scary things that can happen to young boys who don't have like loving grown-ups at home to take care of them. And it's like there are several paths, and most of them are really, really hard to look at. Yeah. So that's the thing in that book.
Absolutely.
The other typhus book I read was one recently that I put on my list and like that I read the last couple weeks called The Illegitimate Duke by Sophie Barnes. This was a new to me author. She's published a lot. It was another chaos read. It's the third in the series. I like caught up. Like there were a few things that I'm like, okay, maybe I missed, but I was able to follow. Okay. But I think it's set in the Regency era based on several like clues she gave. So Regency era, the male main character, he's a physician and he's like inherited this dukedom. And he's like, this is this classic example of, I'm like, I think he's smarter for the times than a physician actually would be. I had a few times during the book I was like, did they know this? But basically there's a typhus outbreak in St. Giles, which is like a slum, and the hero had typhus and like has this immunity and knows this, but like wants to make sure there's a quarantine. And this quarantine makes the COVID quarantines look very tame, because it's like, well, we'll shoot people if they try and leave the slums. And I was like, what? Yeah. So I was like, different times. It felt so this was published in 2018, but it felt interesting reading this in 2024. So I guess like notable moments, of course, like the heroine is like, they're trying to protect her, of course she gets typhus, and it was interesting. So they think at this point, they're like, well, maybe it spread respiratory wise. Like they didn't know that it's not a respiratory pathogen, it's spread through lice. And so that misconception's there, which I think would be relevant for the times. And then, well, maybe a slight spoiler alert, but the hero like ends up rescuing the heroine and nursing her back to health.
Spoiler at all. We knew she was getting it, so that there could be a caretaking moment.
He shaves her hair, because it's infested with lice. And I was like,
there's an Outlander for that.
It's also in when Beauty Tamed the Beast, he shaves her head. That's for a different reason. But in the Illegitimate Duke, it's because it's this lice infestation. So I thought the book was okay. There was like some anachronisms in the book where I was like, but it does have typhus. So I will give that one a shout out. Okay. We got just a couple more pandemics. I know I'm like running over.
Okay, hey, before we get to the next pandemic, really quickly, I need to let all of our Romancelandia University students know the secret word. Dr. Jillian Carmichael requested that the secret word be herpes. So go ahead and DM me, DM Very Romance, the word herpes, to let us know that you watched this lecture and get your extra credit points.
Herpes. Yay, herpes.
All right, next disease.
Next up. We got cholera, which I feel like most people have heard of cholera. So cholera is another bacterial pathogen, so not virus. This is caused by a bacterium. The causative agent is infection with Vibrio cholerae. That's the name of the bacteria. And it's actually a toxin that's produced by the bacteria when it's in the human gut. This is transmitted in the fecal oral route. So typically like drinking contaminated water is like the top reason people get this. And I was doing some reading because I'm not a bacteriologist. About 10% of people who get infected with cholera will have the incredibly severe symptoms of like intense watery diarrhea. And basically like your body is like clearing itself of all liquid. People die from dehydration from cholera. So that's what kills you, is the toxin basically makes your gut go like release all its water and you die from dehydration. What's really interesting is that the best treatment, and so cholera still exists today. The best treatment it's this oral rehydration solution. It's basically giving person like special electrolytes. It's super cheap. It's like a salt solution, and it helps to rehydrate them enough that they'll be fine. And so it's not like, yes, there's antibiotics, but it's not even like a vaccine or antibiotics. It's literally like making sure people can stay hydrated. And so you're like, oh, okay, so it's not a big problem. Well, wrong. Think about places that have contaminated drinking water today. So like what's going on right now in Gaza, right? Like not having clean drinking water. So we see this in war zones a lot. People are at risk for cholera. We see this in places where it floods. You don't have access to clean drinking water, so people get cholera. And you're like, well, it's an easy fix. Well, people who don't have access to clean drinking water don't have access to the oral rehydration solution. So there are still people like in vulnerable situations. If you don't have clean drinking water, you're vulnerable to cholera. So we still see cholera outbreaks. And it's unfortunate because it's like so easy to prevent death if you have this solution. But again, access to healthcare. And so it is still a problem. So there were cholera epidemics throughout history, and I didn't realize it's more of a recent thing. So according to my research, the first known cholera pandemic was in India in like the Regency era. And then it had kind of like spread and would like pop up in waves throughout like Europe and North America. And it would be a whole bunch of people would get sick and then it would kind of like die down. And so just like a shout out, if you want to read a nonfiction book, because I love nonfiction, there's a book called The Ghost Map, and it's all about the doctor who kind of figured out what was causing cholera and like modern epidemiology. So that was really interesting. And it's set in it's about this outbreak that happened in 1854. So there's some like really cool epidemiology that you can read about cholera outbreaks. But I found two books, historical romance books that kind of feature cholera. And so the first historical romance book is one that I read for the Romancelandia thing. And it was a book set in New York City in 1830, it was the first time I'd read a book set in New York in that time period. It's called The Doctor's Discretion by E.E. Ottoman. And I had not read this author before. So I believe the author is trans and writes a lot of like trans characters. So this is a queer romance. It was really interesting. So it was published in 2018. It's set in New York City in 1831. It's a male-male romance, and one of the characters is trans. And both of them are doctors. They're both physicians. And one of the physicians, so there's not an active cholera outbreak happening in the city, but one of the physicians has kind of basically like PTSD from treating cholera outbreaks like in the tenements in New York City. So New York City had a lot of cholera outbreaks before these sanitation efforts, because like cholera is one of those diseases that can be basically eliminated with good sanitation. And so there were a bunch of cholera outbreaks like all throughout the world, but in New York, like 1830s, 1840s. So that was an interesting book, especially if you want to read a romance that features physicians. And it was a real short read, but I had
there's an interesting sort of conceit, like the beginning of the book is like a colleague has died and they're gonna like sort through this deceased physician's things. So they're just like in this beautiful, quiet, empty house, and it's like somebody comes and like lays out tea and a little breakfast for them in the morning and then leaves, and then they're going through like specimen jars and leafing through notebooks, and it's so cozy. And then there's like when the plot gets going, it's like a lot less cozy, but like you just want to stay there at the doctor's house.
Yes
That's what the companion
he
is.
romanticizes things like to the nth degree. Like it's just you're always just like, I just want to live here in this part of the book.
Cottagecore, at least the companion by E.E. Ottoman was, and I just wanted to spend a weekend.
Debbie pointed out that this would be a great one to add to like your trans rights readathon.
Yes.
So if you want infectious disease, the Doctor's Discretion. So that was interesting. And then I've read one book that actually like features an active cholera outbreak. So I actually read this one not for the infectious disease content, because it had groveling in it, which is like my favorite trope. So it's If You Deceive by Kresley Cole. Kresley Cole's really known for her like the Immortals After Dark paranormal series. So Lothair and all of that. But she also writes
the Lothair Hive is present tonight.
We have the Lothair Hive with us, yeah.
But she also
they're in the comments. I love it.
Like traditional historical romance. Debbie. She's written traditional historic romance too. So If You Deceive is actually the third book in this like the Scottish Brothers series. So it was published in 2007. I believe it's set in 1849 between like Scotland and Paris. And basically like the cholera part of the story is the heroine ends up running away for groveling reasons. Yeah, right.
Can't grovel without a little liver spat.
Yes. Yeah. To Paris, where I think she had grown up. It's been a few years since I've read this one. To Paris, and she basically ends up in the part of Paris where there's a huge cholera outbreak, and there was a cholera outbreak in Paris in 1849. And so they quarantined parts. So this would have been like the second major cholera outbreak. So they knew to like kind of quarantine it down. So they quarantined parts of Paris, and she's basically trapped in the area where this cholera epidemic is happening. She gets cholera. Like, are we shocked? No, we are not shocked.
She's gotta get cholera so there can be caretaking.
So there can be caretaking.
Plus, he like breaks through quarantine. It's like police, whatever. So he like breaks through and rescues her. And like, it's a good grand gesture. I don't think that cholera was well described, because people who have cholera have fevers for a week, and that like happens in the book. I'm like, but there is cholera representation.
Cool.
Grovel is good. Cholera is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cholera is medium. Grovel's great.
But like, I did like the book. So if you like Kresley Cole, it was a good read. Oh, the first big cholera outbreak is in the first dressmakers.
Oh gosh. Well, now we sold her on book one.
This is why you probably should have started with book one.
Forgot about that, Meg. It's in the backstory. That's right. Okay, great shout out. Everybody just read all of the Dressmakers for.
Right. Yeah, the Dressmakers is such a good series.
On my TBR. Okay, I will read it in order. Okay, I promise.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. It's
so
all
the
we
next,
ask.
we're almost done. I got two more diseases to get through, I think. Okay, so we got tuberculosis, aka consumption. I feel like this has been mentioned a lot. So tuberculosis is caused by bacterial infection, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It's still a problem today.
For girlies who started reading romance because you loved Moulin Rouge, you know the drill.
Oh.
Yep. So
there we go.
I mean, it's still a big problem today. And today we get a lot of drug resistant, like multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. So like antibiotic resistance, if you've heard of that, like this is a big problem. And TB is just the type of infection it is. It's really hard to treat. So it's not like a 10-day course of antibiotics is going to treat it. No, like it's still a big problem. I know it's a problem. And I haven't worked with TB. It's a bacterial pathogen. Like I have friends who have. I was looking it up. Like over 1 million people died from TB last year. Like it's still a huge problem today. Nice. And so there's a lot of books in historical romance that mention consumption. We tend to like agree was caused by tuberculosis. So there's people like coughing up blood, right? We're like, aha. And again, this is us as the modern reader, as the 2024 reader. We're like, aha, you have tuberculosis.
So I don't think I realized that they were like different things. I thought that they just called tuberculosis consumption, but consumption is like the result of untreated tuberculosis?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Or like tuberculosis disease. So not all tuberculosis infections will make you like dreadfully sick. There's a latent tuberculosis where like you're infected, but you're not really sick.
Okay.
That's like a whole thing. And I'm sure, and again, this goes back to diagnostics. So people could have been sick with something that was making them cough up blood that wasn't necessarily tuberculosis, right? Like, but it would have been like under consumption.
Okay, sure.
Right? Because like the diagnostics weren't a thing, but like
whatever's going on, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, like when I see consumption, I just think tuberculosis, but that's because I have my 2024 brain.
Yeah,
I think that's how it's meant to be, right?
Yeah,
and so
I think that's what most authors are angling for.
Yeah, and like this shows up in a lot of romance books. So again, Devil in Winter, which is our infectious disease trifecta. Evie's dad is dying from tuberculosis. Never Marry a Cowboy by Lorraine Heath. I read this one for the tuberculosis. It's an interesting book. Basically, the heroine's like dying of tuberculosis, and then all of a sudden
I'm not gonna read it. I refuse.
She's saved by sex, guys. It's not.
It's not. Yeah. There's waterfall sex though in the book, so you know.
So I'm not gonna read it because
consumption.
This book's HEA is ruined by one of my favorite books of all time, and I just
Emily
hate
with it.
when an author kills their own HEA. Like, what was Lorraine like? Calm down. Let them
forgot about that.
In peace.
If you've read The Outlaw and the Lady first, and then you go back to read this, it's a little bit horrifying.
You're like, wait,
that's true.
What?
Wait, what? The guy that I
I haven't read The Outlaw and the Lady yet.
You'll love it. It's great.
And then the other book that a lot of us love is Two Rogues Make a Right by Cat Sebastian, where Martin, I think it's Martin. Is it Martin? Martin has consumption.
Yeah.
It's like it is cottagecore, right? Like to his element. They're like literally one of the characters has had weak lungs and he ends up contracting tuberculosis and getting consumption. It's just a wonderful book. I think it was the first Cat Sebastian book I read ever.
Is he gonna be okay? Like, is Martin gonna be okay? That's the thing where I finished this book.
Lie to me. Lie to me if the answer's no.
Like, I mean, eventually he's going to die from it, but like we can contrive a happily ever after. Oh my God! Okay. So this is not infectious disease related, but have you read the Fifth Avenue Rebels series by Joanna Schutt?
Not yet. No.
Which one?
The last one. The last one.
So wait, what are the titles of that one?
It's the one. It's the Duke one where I can see the cover in my head.
Duke Gets Even? Is the Duke Gets Even part of that series?
Yes, that's it. The Duke Gets Even.
Yeah. I did read those.
Wait, he has like congenital heart. Oh, actually, this is virology related. So he has congenital heart failure because he had some viral infection early on, and viral infections can cause congenital heart failure. But it basically leaves us like he's gonna die in 10 years from congenital heart failure. And I'm like,
that's the HGA. Oh no!
That book was so so good though. Like the
good,
last book in that series
really,
was nuts.
I was
so good.
Anxious about the early deaths. I know, sorry, tangent.
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, but I coped with it with Martin. I mean, when you finish Two Rogues Make Right, you do have the sense of like, this is probably time limited.
Yeah. Accept it. Yes.
Which is so interesting. It's like, it doesn't feel the same as an HFN. It feels like an HEA, but like we're looking into the face of the fact that in these stories people die. Like it's the thing where like when you're reading a story that takes place in the Victorian era, you're kind of shutting off the part of your brain that's like, if these were real people, they'd be dead now. Right. And then if you read a historical that takes place in like the 1950s, you're like, does the couple and We Could Be So Good, like, what happens when the AIDS crisis sets in?
Oh my God, I had
are they okay?
Thought.
You know, sorry to like bum everybody.
No, I
haven't read that one yet, but yes, you're right with the 40-year time span. Yeah.
There have been, so yeah. No, I have thought about the same thing. Yeah. Oof. It is hard. I guess to like make maybe not a counter argument, but like if people had reached adulthood by Victorian era, then they've survived all of those childhood diseases.
Yeah.
And so they're like, probably like, okay.
We're all, if you have European ancestry, everybody we're talking about tonight, you survived the strongest of the bunch. You're here because somewhere in your family lineage, somebody was like, not today, cholera.
Survived the Black Death.
Yeah, the bubonic plague came for your family, and some of them got out alive.
It's like a classic example of like genetic, I don't know, evolution that goes beyond
Russian roulette. I don't know.
With Black Plague, it sounds like
I got one more pathogen. I know.
Okay, one more pathogen.
I've got one more pathogen.
We're running so long, but this has been really fun.
I know.
1918 influenza, also known as the Spanish flu. So, just a fun fact. Before COVID, when people would be like, so like, why do you care about viruses? I'd be like, well, do you remember the 1918 influenza? Because like most people have heard about this. I'm like, we are overdue for another pandemic. Like there's going to be another one. And like we all said this as virologists because like we knew this, but we didn't know. And then like COVID happened. We're like, oh, yeah.
We kept saying it and then it was true.
You're like, there goes my fun meeting anecdote. Yeah.
I know. COVID was not
now I need a new icebreaker.
I know. But so the 1918 influenza. So this was a Reddit find because I was like, I know there's at least a romance that's set during this period, and also like I definitely want to read more 20th century historical romances set from like 1900 to like 1950, 1960 because I think that's just, it's definitely historical, but it's just very different than earlier than the Regency era or the Georgian era. So the 1918 influenza is caused by flu. It's a virus. The H1N1 influenza A virus is what caused it. The earliest documented case was actually in Kansas, so it didn't originate in Spain. I think some people know the history, but like why it's called the Spanish influenza is during World War II or World War I, Spain was like neutral. And so they were actually reporting things. And so it got reported in the news that there was this flu. And so it was called the Spanish influenza, even though the first documented case that we know about was in Kansas in like one of those camps with soldiers. So, that's always fun.
That's fun.
Why you should not name viruses where they came from, even though it happens all the time. But the earliest documented case was in March of 1918 in Kansas. So this is right at the end of World War I. And then over basically 2 years, the 1918 flu killed an estimated 17 to 50 million people. So it killed a bunch of people. Like it was incredibly deadly. And what is so bad about, like what was so horrific about it is that just because of like, I don't know, molecular virology reasons and whatnot, it targeted young, healthy adults. So typically flu kills like babies and old people. Like those are the two like risk groups who are most likely to die from influenza just in a normal flu season. The 1918 flu killed young, healthy adults. And so it was just very unexpected. And we go into all the science about that, but for time's sake, I won't. But the worst wave of the 1918 flu was in the fall of 1918. And I found one book. I found one romance that is set during this influenza, and that I guess includes the 1918 influenza. And so the book is Home by Morning by Alexis Harrington. I had never heard of this author before, but I was like, okay, this is marketed as a romance. I will read it. I listened to the audiobook. It was published in 2011. I will say the romance isn't anything to write home about. I thought it was like, yeah. But the flu content was top notch. So the pandemic, so I will give it a 5 on the pandemic rating. The romance, like it was a romance. There is a happily ever after.
Yeah, how many virus emoji, how many chili peppers, and how many stars?
5 virus emoji, and I would say like 2 hearts for the romance. Okay. But what's cool, so it's set in Oregon in 1918 in a small town, and our heroine is actually a physician. So we have a female doctor, which is really cool to read about because that's, kind of rare in historical romances. And she basically is coming through her hometown and gets stuck there. She's like on her way to go to Seattle for like a new job or something. And she gets stuck there during this outbreak of flu, and because the town doesn't have a doctor, so she's basically the doctor for the town. And the flu outbreak starts in their small town when someone, like a young boy, he was like 18, he had just enlisted, he had been away at a camp, like training to go fight in the war. He came back to visit and brought flu back. And this happened, right? Like you had all of these young men living in close quarters. It's like great breeding grounds for influenza. And so then you have this outbreak of flu, and the heroine is like trying to take care of people, and they know like it's the flu, but wait, the flu's not acting like we think the flu is acting. And I will again, I didn't love the romance part, but I think the author did a great job representing the 1918 flu here. She got the symptoms correct. And just kind of the horror of watching all of these young people die. And what's really interesting is she included some details about people wearing masks. And so it felt really like, I was like, ooh, I got chills when I was reading it, because this was published in 2011, and people masked. I mean, they masked during the 1918 influenza. Yeah. Like they knew like these things could be spread respiratory, so they wore.
Yeah, remember when we were all like at home looking at pictures, like black and white photos of folks walking around?
It was from the 1918 flu.
Yeah.
Is that where the like, what was the conical thing that?
Plague. That was way.
I was like, I'm picturing the old-fashioned thing that, was it physicians who wore them or something back in the day?
Plague. I think I could be wrong. That's not 1982. That's like way back. But the like masking, like wearing like cloths over your face, that was the 1918 flu. In the book, I thought this was really interesting. There's a scene, and of course, like I'm reading this with my like 2024. We've just lived through COVID. Okay, Meg is confirming. Yes, physicians wore the beaks things for the black.
Okay, I was like, I just have seen the black and white photos.
It was mostly to scare children. As we discussed, quackery was running rampant, and the doctors, the diagnostics weren't there, and they were like, "This is funny."
Yeah.
So it was basically.
It was for distance, probably. It was like, this reminds me to stay this far away.
I don't know if it helped or not. But the masks might have helped. But
they might have helped.
What was really interesting in the book is there's this one part, and this book, Home by Morning, was published in 2011. So, a decade before COVID. There's a part where the doctor, Jessica, she's asking the mayor, she's like, can you shut down public events so we don't have people congregating? Which, like, obviously that's what you want, right? And like this had happened during other. And so, yeah, that showed up in the book. I thought that was really interesting. So definitely the romance, but the flu content, fantastic. So yeah, I think that's all the viruses I have. I have
Jillian. That was so many viruses, and that was so many good book recommendations.
Yes.
And
I know we're getting so many.
We will compile all of this into a grid post. Right now, we're behind. We've done Meg's grid post, but we're going to do a grid post for every lecture we've done. And Jillian's is like, it's going to be quick to put together, frankly, because she's extremely organized.
I did a Google Doc.
These notes are amazing.
And Can I say like one more thing?
We'll have that up soon.
So like I talked about, a bunch of like virus, and again, these were viruses and bacteria, pathogens that can cause pandemics. So I think that's like interesting and relevant and something that would have shown up in a lot of historical romance books. But also notable is like what is missing from my list. So I don't have the more recent pandemic because we're talking about historical romance and we can argue about when the historical era started, but like I don't have Ebola. I don't have HIV.
That's like 80s,
These viruses emerged in the late 70s, early 80s. So too early, I think, for historical romance. But still, like, hugely important. Like, HIV has killed millions of people. And so those are ones that I did not include because I don't think they count, / I haven't read books with them. And then also just like putting like a request, I have been looking and I have not found books, historical romances that mention yellow fever or polio. And those are two other viruses that caused pandemics. I think most people have heard of yellow fever and polio. There's effective vaccines for them now. Polio's almost eradicated. And so I'm still hunting. I know they have to exist out there. I just haven't found them yet. So I went through the major pandemics, but there are more other like infectious diseases that I did not get around to.
There was typhoid. We barely touched on that.
You can read about Typhoid Mary. That's a Wikipedia rabbit hole to go down.
As you're talking about this, I'm like, I remember a Call the Midwife about that. I remember a Call the Midwife about that.
Oh my God, I forgot about Call the Midwife.
Oh like gosh. Almost everything that you mentioned, I was like, they did that on Call the Midwife.
God, that was a postpartum show for me. I watched Big like 4 seasons of that.
Big time. I listened to like, there's like 2 or 3 books I listened to them and they were heavy, man.
So Jillian, before we wrap up, I want to know, in your opinion, could Sebastian St. Vincent have actually understood, known, have heard of germ theory? Is there any way somebody in Devil in Winter could have actually been like proffering masks?
Is Devil in Winter is like 1840s, right?
Wait,
Meg, if you're still in the comments, we're definitely past the Regency for the Wallflowers.
It's Victorian. I think it's Victorian. 1850s.
I was looking this up. I don't know.
Yeah. Meg.
Like, maybe, like, I think people will know, like, coughing is bad. So, like, okay, open a window, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I do feel, I would have to get back to you on that in terms of, like,
little
anachronistic. But I think, like, a general person would maybe not have known.
Jillian, we're going to have you back in the fall because I just wanted to ask you stuff that I didn't even get to. Like, I wanted to ask you to, like, drag the practice of bleeding.
I feel like we could, I'm sure there have to be MDs on here who would know.
We're going to find them.
Yeah, we're going to find them.
Again, I'm not a physician. I am a scientist who studies infectious disease. We will allow the anachronism for our public health king.
Yeah. If he's good enough for Lisa Kleypas, he's good enough for us.
Yeah.
It's a great moment. Like, it's a characterizing moment.
It's like great, especially because of the journey that character has been on, for him to show up and be like, I'm actually like a lot smarter than I look.
Yeah.
Smarter than I acted in a previous book.
Just again, you got the trifecta of infectious disease.
They're covering a lot.
Devil in Winter is like, if you're going to read infectious disease, like that's a great place to start.
Gosh, this is so great, Jillian. Like, we have so much good info here. Like, man, everybody taking part in this lecture is much smarter for having come and learned which books they can read to, experience a hero who is scarred from his bout of smallpox.
The Raven Prince is so good.
It's really good.
It's really good.
He has a weird name. He has like a cringy name, I remember.
I have it on my shelf. I
didn't mind the scars.
There's so, like, infectious disease is so interesting, just like as a field. And so that's why I tried to focus this talk specifically on pandemics. But like, you could literally do a whole thing on STIs in romance. You could probably do a whole thing on, like, infections from bullet wounds or broken bones. And I didn't even mention malaria. That's another one that shows up sometimes in romance. I tried to focus on the ones that were like,
Yep.
these are pandemics that are that are like really infecting a whole bunch of people that are like could pose threat to, you know, thousands.
Yeah.
But it is always interesting.
Thank you. This was an incredible amount of research.
This is awesome.
We are so appreciative that you came to chat with us, that we have this. We'll share this recording for all of our students to catch up on later. And thank you, Dr. Jillian Carmichael. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
This is my herpes plushie.
Herpes.
That's the code word.
Which
great. We're signing.
I will just put this out up there. If you've ever found herpes in a romance novel, please send it to me.
That's her other
this would be contemporary romance, because it was not in historical romance. But I'm looking.
Yep.
I'm looking.
Wanted. Herpes.
That my like what I want. The Reddit, the subreddit, like the romance subreddit. I'm always like, help me out. They
I love it.
Point.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, Jillian, thanks
for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Off.
Okay.
All right. Signing off. Have a good night.
Bye.